So as Emmer is withdrawing, Mark Molinaro, a moderate New York freshman Republican, stands up at the microphone and says, well, instead of restarting this process and having a candidate forum and sending everybody home for a good cry, let's just take a non-binding poll on where people would be on the person who came in second to Tom Emmer, and that was Mike Johnson. And Elise Stefanik said, well, that's against the rules. The rules don't contemplate it. We can't do that. And brilliantly, Mark Molinaro says, then I move for unanimous consent that the rules be waived and we take a poll on whether or not Mike Johnson could be our speaker nominee. And guess who objects to that unanimous consent request? Kevin McCarthy.
Who was that?
Kevin McCarthy stands up and erupts and says, I object to doing a roll call on Mike Johnson. And Mike Johnson was exasperated. All the times Johnson had voted for McCarthy, had carried his water, maybe even voted for some bills he didn't like because he was working toward the Republican conference's stated objectives under McCarthy. And here was the thing. It showed everyone that it was actually McCarthy who was working to knife Scalise. It was actually McCarthy who was working to knife Jim Jordan. It was McCarthy working to knife everyone, and he hadn't yet figured out a way to knife Mike Johnson.
You expect the other side to be knifing you in the front and the back, but your own side. I'm glad today he's not on the War Room. He's with us, and he's put on a tie for us because this is America First. I'll be with Steve Bannon later today. From Florida, Matt Gaetz, welcome to the Salem Network.
Thanks so much, Dr. Gorka, and I want to thank you and your listeners for all of the fuel you provided to our movement over these last few weeks as we've transitioned from Kevin McCarthy to Mike Johnson, and this is actually a transition we can be quite excited about. Mike Johnson is a God-fearing man. He is a constitutional scholar and expert. He doesn't believe that America needs to be forever entangled in foreign wars without a goal or aim or plan or purpose, and he understands the Trump ideology of strong borders and better trade deals for the workers in our country. I've sat next to Mike Johnson for 7 years on the House Judiciary Committee. We served together on the Armed Services Committee. I know him as well as I know anyone in the United States Congress, and I couldn't be happier for him, for the Republican Party, and for the country that we finally got a speaker who is not totally bought and paid for by the special interests on K Street. And that's not a specific criticism of Kevin McCarthy. That was the case with Nancy Pelosi. That was the case with Paul Ryan. That was the case with John Boehner. Now we've got a good, honorable, virtuous man. And we have a plan that doesn't involve just mushing every agency of government together for one up or down vote. Just today on the House floor, we're going to be taking votes on the specific legislation dealing with our energy and water priorities. We're going to be slashing all of these incentives for the Green New Deal that Biden had advanced, and we're going to end the Waters of the United States rule that's killing agriculture all over our nation.
I texted you yesterday. I congratulated you. I think you were, of course, the catalyst for moving from McCarthy to now Johnson. A lot of people, you said you're excited by this maneuver. I say, if this is chaos, give me more chaos. Reminds me of when we were in the White House and everybody said, oh my gosh, the chaos in the White House. I said, okay, the border's secure, ISIS is crushed, the stock market is bigger than it's ever been, China's back in its box. I want more crisis like this. I want more chaos like that. You were criticized roundly for the last 3 weeks, saying, oh my gosh, how dare he do this? And he didn't have a strategy. Will you respond to that criticism? A lot of conservatives are saying, we have to lay down the law with Johnson. These are demands on budgets, on the border. Can you talk to us about your expectations moving forward?
Well, there is no side deal with Mike Johnson like we had to have with Kevin McCarthy, because we trust Mike Johnson to look us in the eye and tell us the truth, even if that is something we don't want to hear. Kevin McCarthy's ultimate problem was he made multiple contradictory promises to everyone, and then when those came to be reconciled, it bred distrust throughout the conference, but really Kevin McCarthy was the fountainhead of that mistrust. There is something called constructive chaos. There's times when the orderly manner of things is a suboptimal path.
Yeah.
If you're walking on the road to perdition, you need a little chaos to get off that track and onto a better track. I did have a strategy, and it was based in my knowledge that there was a group of people who all wanted to be speaker, who would showcase their ambition when the time was right. I know Mike Johnson has long believed he had the capability to be Speaker of the House. We've sat next to each other. He's talked about how some of his skills would lend to that position. Now, it wasn't Mike Johnson or bust. I think Jim Jordan could have been great. I think Jody Arrington could have been great. I think Kevin Hearn could have been great. Mark Green could have been great. We had this really, really strong group of talented people. I knew once we got Kevin McCarthy out of the way, that talent would emerge. And now I think we've got somebody who's really the cream of the crop in Mike Johnson.
We're talking to the representative for Florida's 1st Congressional District. Follow him at Rep Matt Gaetz on Twitter and mattgaetz.com. Matt, I've watched this guy. I wasn't surprised. People said, who is this guy? I recognized his face from hearings, from fighting back impeachment, from grilling Alejandro Mayorkas to within an inch of his life on the floor of Congress. There are those who are attacking him, of course, on the left. And when Washington Post and CNN attacks him, for me, that's a great sign. Some people on our side who are alleged conservatives say, oh, no, this is the wrong guy. He's as bad as... Somebody tweeted today, this is as bad as McCarthy, based upon comments that Mike made the day after the George Floyd death about how his black adopted son has problems in comparison to his white son. Would you talk to those who are ostensible conservatives who say, nah, this guy's as bad as McCarthy?
Well, the good news is this won't be an esoteric argument in 9 months, because we will be able to compare the 9 months of Kevin McCarthy to the period we have ahead with Mike Johnson. And Chip Roy, a great conservative out of Texas, said to a group of us, what are you running on? What are you going to tell the American people that Republicans fought for and fixed? Are you going to run on an open border? Are you going to run on the fact that we greenlit $4 trillion in additional debt in this crappy debt limit deal that Kevin McCarthy negotiated? Are you going to campaign on continuing resolutions to advance Nancy Pelosi's funding priorities alongside the policies selected by Chuck Schumer? Is that really what you want? Because that was what we got under Kevin McCarthy. You saw in just Mike Johnson's opening remarks a person who I think is deeply devout to conservative principles, but who has a manner that may be a little different than ours, Seb. You know, we're pretty rough and tumble when it comes to advancing the America First agenda. Mike Johnson, I think, is a very inviting leader. Yeah. He has a very cherished leadership style.
And a great sense of humor, clearly, from the stuff he was doing trolling Nancy Pelosi yesterday on Twitter. But I think you mentioned God 4 times in one sentence in front of your colleagues as he was convening the House. That's a good enough sign for me. I want to say we salute you here at America First, millions across the nation. Matt Gaetz, the man who made it possible. MattGaetz.com.
For more videos like this, please smash the subscribe button and don't forget to like the video. We really appreciate it. Thanks for watching the America Truth channel.